Using Topology tool for investigating risks of CVD and CKD, number 1544, VPT 097, February 21, 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation, category CVD, CKD and Metabolic Systems. Preface. This research is conducted in a setting that is uncommon in modern academic medicine. It is not driven by the need for promotion, external funding, or institutional acceptance. It is driven by a long-term commitment to understanding the truth of how a human biological system behaves under sustained metabolic load. This freedom allows the research direction to be determined by internal consistency between data, model, and observed physiological outcomes rather than by external requirements. The dataset used in this work is not a cross-sectional population cohort but a continuous 17-year longitudinal record from a single individual. From the perspective of traditional biostatistics, an N=1 study is often considered limited in its ability to produce generalized conclusions. However, this research does not aim to describe population averages. Its objective is to identify the dynamic behavior of a complex system over time. With dense and continuous measurements, a single long-term time sequence can reveal trajectories, turning points, phase transitions, load-response relationships, and structural remodeling that cannot be observed in short-term or cross-sectional studies. This work therefore belongs to the category of longitudinal system identification rather than population statics. In this framework, the human body is treated as a time-dependent structure, and disease progression is interpreted as the cumulative effect of long-term load. The author is in a unique position. The same person is the data generator, the observer, and the model builder. Research is carried out not as a career requirement but as a lifelong effort to understand and survive multiple chronic conditions. This creates a closed loop in which daily life, continuous measurement, mathematical modeling, and clinical outcomes constantly validate one another. For this reason, the value of this study lies not in statistical generalization, but in the clarity with which it reveals the governing mechanisms of metabolic disease progression and recovery over time. Introduction. This study is not based on a population database or a short clinical trial. It comes from a continuous 17-year record within a single human body, in which body weight, glucose, and the risks of developing cardiovascular disease CVD and chronic kidney disease CKD were measured year after year under the same lifestyle control strategy. Most medical reports look at a single lab value and decide whether it is above or below a target line. That approach is like looking at one photo and trying to understand a whole movie. In contrast, this study uses a time sequence dataset. When the full trajectory is visible, the behavior of the cardiovascular system and the kidney system can be examined as evolving structures under changing metabolic load. Topology provides the proper language for this type of investigation, rather than asking whether a single value is high or low. Topology asks a different question: what is the geometric shape of the long-term trajectory of disease development and progression? To mortality diseases, cardiovascular disease CVD and chronic kidney disease CKD do not develop from a single abnormal reading. They are the result of long-term exposure to metabolic load. This study, body mass index BMI and estimated average glucose EEG represent the two primary lifestyle inputs, while CVD risk and CKD risk represent the outputs of organ responses. When these variables are placed into a topological space and connected in time order, they form a trajectory. That trajectory shows whether the system is moving toward instability or toward structural recovery. My previous paper, Metabolic Load, Structural Recovery, and Post-Stroke Decoupling of Heart and Kidney Opening (No.1543), VPT number 096, February 21, 2026. Address the same two diseases from a broader perspective using a descriptive narrative style. This paper is a continuation of that prior work, but it applies the topological data analysis TDA research model. 3 TDA charts are generated in this study, including 1 a normalized radar chart with 4 parameters for 2010, 2015, 2020, and 2025. 2 a 3D scattering time path for CVD risk versus BMI and 3 a 3D scattering time path for CKD risk versus BMI and together, they transform numerical data tables into a visible, dynamic geometric representation of the underlying structure. A simple description of TDA model. Topological data analysis TDA in this medical research study refers to the geometric shape, the continuity and connectivity of data points, and the directional movement of long-term physiological or medical data. All variables were first normalized to the same scale so that they represent comparable energy levels. Each year of data forms a single point in a multidimensional state space defined by metabolic input S and organ disease outputs. Topology can handle n-dimensional repressions, however. Dimensions beyond 3 cannot be displayed in conventional graphical form and can only be conceptualized abstractly by the human brain. Therefore, I carefully selected the output strain and the two primary input stressors as the three axes of representation. We live in a many-dimensional body. But to see the direction of disease clearly, one project the system onto three dominant forces, the organ response and the two strongest influential loads, so that hidden trajectory becomes visible to any reader, whether clinician or patient. All annual data points were connected in chronological order to form a continuous trajectory representing the metabolic history of the body. The direction of movement indicates disease recovery or deterioration. The curvature reflects transitions between physiological phases. Whether faster or slower, the distance between data points represents the magnitude of structural change in the biomarker-disease relationship. TDA results. The radar chart shows a progressive inward contraction from 2010 to 2025. The total system energy generated by BMI, CVD risk, and CKD risk, represented by the four polygon areas, decreased as follows: 2010 to 0.002150, 0.2512020, 0.06820 to 50.08. This represents a 99.6% reduction in total metabolic organ energy from the beginning of the study to 0.008 to 0.00 equals 0. 996. The 3D CVD risk trajectory forms a smooth descending path from the upper right high load corner toward a lower left low risk stable region. Total CVD trajectory length equals 1.915. The 3D CKD risk trajectory shows a sharp early drop from 2010 to 2011, followed by a long plateau from 2011 to 2012. Total CKD trajectory length equals 1.961. These long, continuous path lengths confirm true structural remodeling rather than short-term fluctuation. The most significant observation is that the total CKD trajectory length is 2.4% longer than that of CVD. 1.961, 1.915 equals 1.024, indicating a slightly greater cumulative structural adaptation in CKD. Turning point analysis. Both systems show a clear transition between 2014 and 2016. Average annual movement before the turning period, CVD, 0.275 per year to 0.304 per year. Average annual movement after the turning period, CVD, 0.070 per year to 0.063 per year. This indicates that the early phase was a rapid damage reduction stage, while the later phase represents entry into a stable low-load maintenance state. Pathophysiological meaning of the turning point for normal readers. The large annual movement before 2014 to 2016 shows a period of fast repair, when metabolic load dropped. The heart and kidneys responded quickly, blood vessels became less stressed. Kidney filtration pressure decreased, and inflammation was reduced. This is the phase in which the body still had strong functional reversibility. After 2016, the annual movement became small. This does not mean no improvement. It means the system had already reached a low-load, stable state. Most of the reversible damage had been corrected. The remaining changes represent slow structural remodeling and long-term protection rather than rapid recovery. Additional notes on TDA. In this study, the topological data analysis TDA results are presented mainly through geometric visualization, including radar charts for multidimensional variables and 3D scatter diagrams for trajectory analysis. These diagrams are intentionally selected because they already display the essential biomedical information: the total system energy, the balance among variables, the direction of recovery or deterioration, the turning point of the system, and the long-term low-load stable state. The physiological meaning becomes directly visible without additional mathematical transformation. Principal component analysis (PCA) is a powerful mathematical tool that converts the original variables into a new coordinate system defined by eigenvectors and eigenvalues. Although this transformation is useful for maximizing statistical variance and reducing dimensionality, the new axes become mathematical combinations of the original variables rather than real physiological quantities. For most clinicians, patients, and general readers, concepts such as eigenvectors and eigenvalues are abstract and difficult to interpret in terms of organ function, metabolic load, or disease progression. In contrast, The geometric diagrams used in this study preserve a direct one-to-one relationship between each axis and a real biomedical variable. Body mass index BMI, daily glucose EEG, CVD risk, and CKD risk remain visible as themselves, not as mathematical mixtures. This allows the reader to see the system behavior and immediately connect it to pathophysiology, biology of human diseases. The objective of this research is not to increase mathematical complexity but to make the long-term behavior of the human body observable and medically meaningful. The major findings: the 2010-2012 early recovery, the 2014-2016 turning point, structural remodeling, and entry into a low-load steady state after 2017 were already clearly demonstrated in the trajectory and radar energy contraction. In this context, PC would provide a more abstract mathematical description but only limited additional biomedical insight. Therefore, in my TDE studies I emphasize direct geometric representation. This approach keeps the analysis visually intuitive for patients, clinically interpretable for physicians, and fully consistent with quantitative mathematical system modeling. Discussion: Topology allows us to see something that cannot be recognized from laboratory thresholds. The key observation is not the absolute value of a single year. The key observation is the geometric shape, trajectory length, and input-output interaction energy of the entire disease path. 1. The radar energy contraction quantifies total system improvement. 2. The long directional trajectory measures the distance of recovery. 3. The turning point marks the beginning of durable structural stability. Even though past damage cannot be erased, long-term load reduction permanently changes the future trajectory. CVD and CKD are not treated as separate diseases in this model. They are structural responses to the same metabolic environment, although their numerical risk levels differ slightly. Clinical meaning for patients: organ protection does not come from chasing perfect laboratory numbers. It comes from maintaining a long-term low-load lifestyle. When these two disease trajectories continue to move toward the stable region year after year, the risks keep declining even in old age, from age 63 to age 79 in my case, and despite 9 major medical events, including 5 CVD episodes, neuropathy, retinopathy, CKD, and stroke. This continuous movie matters more than a series of snapshots. Conclusion: using Topology to examine a 17-year metabolic record reveals that both of my cardiovascular and kidney risks follow a continuous geometric path determined by long-term metabolic load. Even though only 2 primary biomarkers were selected, BMI for obesity and EEG for diabetes, there are 3 key findings. 1. The radar polygon area shows a 99.6% contraction of total system energy. 2. The trajectory lengths of 1.915 and 1.961 quantify the distance of structural recovery for CVD and CKD, respectively. 3. The 2014 to 2016 turning point marks the transition into a durable low-risk state. In summary, the body behaves like a time-dependent structure. Risk rises from cumulative load. Protection comes from sustained load reduction. Past damage cannot be removed, but the future trajectory can still be redirected towards stability. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.